Welcome to the NCO Journal Sergeant's Time podcast, a new series featuring informal conversations with leaders at all levels, where you'll have the unique chance to learn what makes them tick, what their leadership styles are, and what inspires them. With us is Chaga Zapata, Managing Editor of the NCO Journal, Sergeant First Class Osvaldo Akite, the NCOIC, and I'm your host, Staff Sergeant Brandon Cox. Today we welcome a very special guest to our first episode, retired Sergeant Major Dan Dailey, the 15th Sergeant Major of the Army. Sergeant Major Dailey joined the Army in 1989 as an infantryman. During his career, he held every enlisted leadership position, from Bradley Fighting Vehicle Commander to Command Sergeant Major. He participated in Operations Desert Shield, Desert Storm, Iraqi Freedom, and New Dawn. He served as the 15th SMA from 2015 to 2019 and currently serves as the AUSA's Vice President of NCO and Soldier Programs. It's an honor to have you on the show today, Sergeant Major. Thank you for joining us.
Well, Sergeant Cox, thanks for having me on the show, and it's an honor for me as well. Anytime I get to spend some time with the greatest gift the American people have ever received, which is our incredible enlisted and non-commissioned officer corps, it's a good day. So thank you.
How's retirement going, Sergeant Major? Have you been doing any fishing?
Well, actually, it's funny you say fishing. I just got back from Alaska. I was salmon fishing for a week, and that's the first vacation, actually, that I've taken since I retired in December of 2019. So it took me about 3 years to trying to figure out how to take a break. But, you know, I think in the enlisted world, we don't retire ever. We change jobs, and I wasn't done being a soldier. I just ran out of jobs in the Army. So I'm humbled because I get to work with AUSA and continue to support our soldiers and their families every day. So retired from one mission, but continuing almost the same mission, just in a different capacity. And I'm loving every day I get to do it. That's great,
Sergeant Major. Can you talk a bit about what you're doing with the AUSA, or maybe some of the important projects that you're working on?
Yeah, absolutely. And first and foremost, our association, our professional association, just a little bit of history. When it was formed over 70 years ago, was actually created by the United States Army for an intended purpose for it to serve as the voice of the Army and represent the Army in a capacity during a time frame where it was needed the most. I mean, it needed to be represented as an Army. And then it transitioned out of the Army years later, actually to free it up to be able to do some of the things that the Army wanted its association to do. And today we still have that same mission, and it's simple: as we educate, inform, and connect America's people with the United States Army, and we support our soldiers and their families through our 122 chapters that are located across 7 regions across the globe. And I have the honor of running one of 3 of the directorates, which is NCO and Soldier Programs. And bottom line is our left and right limit is moral and ethical conduct on how we support the Army. So everything from individual soldiers all the way to Department of the Army. My job is to figure out how to take care of our soldiers and families and do it ethically and morally correct through the extension of, again, our chapters and the resource of our great civilian and community partners out there.
Sergeant Major, can you tell us a little bit more about the projects that you're working on?
So this time of year, we're really geared up for our annual meeting. We are the co-lead sponsors of the Army 10 Miler, so that's one of my portfolios. I work with the Department of the Army and the Office of Sergeant Major of the Army for Best Warrior. I'm also sponsoring right now the Best Drill Sergeant competition, and we support the Pershing Zone and the Old Guard for their ball that's coming up. So on any given day, we're doing a multitude of things. But really this time of year, we got all the oars in the water getting ready for AUSA's annual meeting. That is October 9th through the 11th here in our nation's capital at the Washington Convention Center. It's a lot of prep work that takes to get that show right each year for the Army, because it's our opportunity to showcase the United States Army each year in our nation's capital.
Sergeant Major, before we get too far into it, I just want to talk a little bit about your past and maybe what your life was like, before the Army or back in Pennsylvania as you were growing up.
Yeah. So I was born and raised one of 4 boys by a hardworking, humble family. We didn't have a whole lot of money, but Mom and Dad worked hard, and Mom kept us morally straight, and Dad kept us physically fit, and with the preference of, if you want something in life, you got to work really hard. My father served in the Army, so I remember being inspired as a young man growing up. That service was something that was considered to be honorable in our family. Wasn't forced on any of us, but it was something that was talked about a lot in the household, and something that I knew my mother and father would greatly appreciate. My oldest brother joined the Army, did one tour, and then my next one behind him, I was three in the line of four. Tried to join the Army, he couldn't get a medical waiver, and then I joined the Army with the intent originally to just do 2 years in the Army, and then come home and go to college and live the American dream. But life changed very quickly after I was in the Army.
Sure. What do you think made you keep going after that first 2-year contract, Sergeant Major?
Yeah, great question. I credit one individual. He was my squad leader, Staff Sergeant Davis. I was in Schweinfurt, Germany. I was coming towards the end of my 2-year tour. I remember sitting in the quad of 115 Infantry in Schweinfurt on comm barracks. And he walks up and he says, Specialist Dailey, have you ever thought about re-enlisting? And at that point, I really didn't. And what do I mean by that? I didn't hate the Army. I didn't think anything other than my job was to come serve my country, do something good, get a good start in life, and go home and live the rest of my life. And I never really thought about a career in the Army. I knew I always wanted to serve in the Army, and I just never thought about it. So he said, well, I don't want you to answer that question. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to send you to PLDC. And at that time, I needed a waiver because I didn't have the service remaining to be able to go to PLDC. And so they gave me a waiver, sent me to PLDC. I came home 30 days later from Grafenwehr. I was distinguished honor graduate and distinguished leadership graduate at PLDC. And I remember calling my father on the phone from Germany and telling him, hey, Dad, I think I'm gonna stick this thing out. I think I'm gonna stay in the Army. And that's how it all happened.
Can you talk about what inspires you, Sergeant Major?
Yeah, I think there's not one single thing. I mean, I get my inspiration obviously on my early days. It was from my family. My brothers inspired me every day in my service in the Army. My father, I always wanted to make him proud. Of course, my mother. And then I got married. As people grow up, I found the love of my life, and I was blessed to marry a wife that was willing to sacrifice everything to come on this Army journey with me, and truly and utterly embraced being an Army spouse. And the service and sacrifice she gave throughout our 30 years of marriage. It was harder for her, I think, to separate from the Army than it was for me. I mean, she didn't want to leave when it was time to go. And then my son. I only have one child. When I was in the age of children, I had a lot of deployments back to back to Iraq, and we made the decision to just have one son. And I'm so proud of him today. He's actually a rocket scientist, and he inspires me. And then there was something I used to say all the time is that if I'm not doing the right thing as a leader, there's probably a soldier out there that's going to know about it. And I don't want to let that one soldier down. That's what made me get up every day as a leader, get out of bed, and try to be a better person. That's what made me get up every single day when I was a sergeant major of the Army and do PT, even though nobody would probably know I wasn't doing it. Because I used to remind myself, we're here for a purpose. It's not just us. It's not our own personal capital gain. We're here to lead America's sons and daughters. It's an incredible and awesome responsibility. And these young men and women that I represent, especially when I became a very senior leader throughout my tenure and then became the SMA, deserve the best leadership ever. And if you're not inspired by that, if you're not ultimately and utterly invested in that, then you're just not giving the appropriate level of leadership that these young men and women deserve in the Army.
That kind of leads, I guess you answered the question. So I was going to ask, how do you inspire your soldiers? Do you think that the answer that you gave there, the response was kind of the same thing?
Yeah. I was just down at Fort Cavazos last week, and a question came up I was doing a leader development session with the 1st Cavalry Division. And this topic of discussion came up, and I said, I used the analogy of there's a reason why you bond with your siblings, your brothers and sisters, your mother and father when you grow up. And that reason is because you share experiences, good, bad, right, and wrong. You go through the hard times. You enjoy the good times together. You fight, you laugh, you cry. And you are forever and eternally bonded to those people, because not necessarily just because you're blood related, it's because of the shared experiences that you have. There's no difference in the military. There's no difference in the squad. Obviously you are in a position of authority as a leader, but those soldiers, those human beings, have to understand that you are just as committed to them as you are your family and your siblings, because especially in time of war, right? I mean, so that critical bond is so important. And leaders and organizations that get that right, you can see it in a minute. You can see the relationship between the leader and the led. And that doesn't mean you have to violate any type of morally ethical conduct within the organization. It's just a trust relationship between you and your soldiers. And I think that's what soldiers are inspired by, when they find those leaders that truly understand the art of leadership, the balance between understanding when a soldier needs to be, disciplined, when they need to be held, when they need to be encouraged and motivated or challenged. And that's really, I think, what inspires our soldiers too. So it's reciprocal. It's back and forth between the leader and the led. As a perfect organization is that leader is being inspired by the members of that organization, and so forth. That inspiration that he receives or she receives from them is seen by them, and they are reciprocally inspired by. And it's just a continuous flow. It's hard to describe, but when you see it, it's amazing.
Can you share a memorable experience, shared experience that you had with your team or squad, something that stands out for you?
Give us a story,
Sergeant
Major.
Yeah. We spent a lot of time, obviously, prepping for combat when I was a squad leader. And a lot of time out in the field. I remember as a young infantry squad leader, and I was a mechanized infantry guy. If we weren't in the motor pool working on the Bradleys, then we were downrange shooting them. And then we weren't doing that. We had to do all of our light infantry tables, because we were still 11 Bravos, and we had to prepare to do those things. So I just remember being in the field an awful lot. And of course, inherently, people get tired. They get weary. And then you're deploying and then redeploying, and then next thing you know, you're back in the field. And I remember the first time as a leader, I realized, hey, I need to start building a bond greater than the work environment. So I started this thing when I was a staff sergeant that said, made all the kids come over to the house. We're going to barbecue. We're going to do this, on a cyclic or regular basis as much as we can. And we're going to bring the families, and we're going to bring the kids, and we're going to bring the dogs, and we're going to make it relaxing, and we're going to have this time together so we can bond and let our families bond, because when we deploy, we need them to work with each other too. And I carried that out through my entire tenure as a leader. I did it as a first sergeant, a battalion CSM, a brigade CSM, a division CSM with all my sergeant majors across the division. And even when I was a sergeant major of the Army, my entire team, once a month, we called it team night. We'd bring everybody in and bond. And I think that's important. And I think that's something, I honestly learned it from another leader. It's something I stole from great leaders that I watched and observed, and their ability to be able to build this team of teams while still maintaining discipline and standards. There was never a time where those members of my squad, even back when I was a staff sergeant, ever felt anything other than the fact that I was their squad leader. And having them in my house and drinking a beer didn't make anything inappropriate. I
remember before deployment, a lot of our families would get together, and it was definitely critical that they built those relationships between us. And it helped with the team too, because then when we went forward, we had all these shared experiences and extra things we could talk about. Do you remember maybe somebody from your past that was really influential for you, that maybe helped shape your leadership moving forward?
Oh my God. Yeah. One of the things I've often said was, I was never the best soldier in the Army, even when I was the SMA, and by no means did I think I was, but I was very lucky. And I was lucky in the fact that I was one of those soldiers that really had awesome leaders. And I know that's not true for every soldier, right? And I know not every leader is a great leader out there. But that's where I think I had an up on everybody else. I actually, by luck, by happenstance, by chance, got assigned to the units with great leaders. And Staff Sergeant Davis, my first squad leader, Jason D. Shipley, my platoon sergeant when I was a squad leader. What an incredible guy that inspired and motivated me. My first sergeant, when I was a platoon sergeant, Mark Baker, later became a sergeant major, just an absolute incredible leader. My battalion sergeant major was a 2-time best ranger competition winner. I mean, who gets these kind of leaders? I don't know, but I did. And I think that's where I had an up on most people. I was being mentored by the best the Army could offer. And it just continued to happen even when I became a sergeant major and a senior sergeant major. And not just enlisted folks. I mean, some of the general officers that I served with, just incredible, incredible people. And if you just take the opportunity to write down or just emulate their actions, it's not that hard. The answers to the test are all around you. You just got to find the right people to ask the answers from.
What did that mentorship look like? What did it look like talking with Sergeant Major Baker and the Shipley and Davis? What did that look like?
Yeah, I think they were the type of leaders that made it very easy, and I just walk in, as simple as it could be in the office and having a conversation of, hey, am I screwed up? Am I doing everything that you expect me to do? And you can't be afraid to do that as a subordinate, and you shouldn't be afraid to allow it to happen as a leader, right? And I learned that from them, and it's amazing when you have this uncontentious conversation with people about performance, how much better it will make you if you allow it to. And the only way I can describe it is, I remember I was the Sergeant Major of the Army, and I had General Odierno as a chief, and then I had General Milley, who came in very shortly after. And within the first 30 days, I got on his calendar. I walk in his office. He goes, "Hey, SMA, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm coming in to get your guidance, sir, and find out if I'm doing what you want me to do and put me on the right track." And he goes, "Nah, you're good. Get out of here. You're doing great, man. You're awesome." I said, "No, sir. No. You're going to take this time to tell me if I'm screwed up or if and what you want me to do and what I need to fix and what I don't, because I can stay busy all day long as the SMA. What I want to do is be helping you shape your priority across our Army and making sure that we're in sync." And then we sat down for like an hour and a half to 2 hours, and he canceled like 2 meetings after that. And I left there with a whole huge notebook full of things to do. It's exactly what my intent was, right? So I always thought it was a subordinate's responsibility to create an environment, at least initiate the environment that's conducive for them to be mentored by their leader. And when you get rid of that contentiousness, when you get rid of that conflict, which people tend to shy away from, the development process is so easy.
That brought up a point here that I wanted to ask you about, Sergeant Major. You brought it up here with some of the leaders who mentored you. Mistakes. You said you weren't afraid to talk to them about the mistakes. Can you tell us about maybe some mistakes that you've made? I think it's important that NCO acknowledge that you can make mistakes and still be able to grow from them in character and in as a leader. So would you be able to tell us a little bit about maybe some mistakes you've made and how you grew from them?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I never made any major mistakes like, going out and getting a DUI or thing like that. I was too well mentored to put myself in a situation like that, and understood the risks and the inherent consequences of such things. But little things, I think the mistakes I made were when I was a young sergeant. And I remember getting counseled, actually when I was a squad leader, by Jason D. Shipley. I lived this thing that was ingrained in me previously of hoo-hoo infantry, there's no such thing as failure, the harder you are, the less you will fall, kind of thing. I wasn't a tyrant to my soldiers, but I was tough on them, and I thought that's the way you develop them, because that's kind of the way in that time frame in the Army that we were raised, that's back when smoking sessions were pretty common. I mean, if you were bored, you went down to smoke the soldiers. I know that's probably not appropriate to say, but that's just the time period that we were in. And we used those, and he taught me a different style of leadership, right? So, meaning you don't need to lead every soldier the same. And that doesn't mean it's unfair. Every human being is different. They all respond differently. He helped me really start to realize that there's an art to this. it's not just a cut and dry cookie thing that you come in and say, here's what we do every day, and people are going to respond and listen. There's an actual art to this. So I think I was making a mistake initially, thinking, hey, this is the way I lead. I watched some folks lead this from outside the organization, but you don't need to emulate those things. You don't need to be the hardcore guy every single day, and that's not what's going to make everybody respond. So early on, I think, again, I benefited from having great leaders that would call me in and say, hey, okay, listen, smoke sessions is not the way to get soldiers to do things every single time. Yeah, so it was great to have those people around. It was.
How did that translate to you becoming like a father? You're not going to smoke do the smoke session with your kid, but so I'm guessing, you learned those different leadership styles through the Army and through your experiences and through mentors that devote time to that. But how did that translate to you becoming a father or being a father?
Yeah, my son was on this podcast with me. He would very much agree with what I'm about to say. I fathered like a soldier, like a leader does to a soldier. To be honest with you, I did. And maybe that was because, and I used to get accused of it by my wife and son all the time. Was, we're not your soldiers. And I used to say, oh, yes, you are. Yes, you are. Not in a negative sense, right? But I got a little bit of that from my father, strict discipline, standards. One of the things I wanted to teach my son was dignity and respect to all those. And it's your job as an individual to respect everybody. And if they don't disrespect you, then just separate yourselves from them, right? And I remember getting this compliment, because jokingly my son and my wife would tell me all the time is that I was a sergeant major at home, just as much at home as I was at work. And I remember going to my son's parent-teacher conference, one of the very few that I got to attend, unfortunately, because, again, this time frame we were heavily in deployment cycles to Iraq and in the field if we weren't over there. And of course, I show up late. I'm in uniform. I'm in Georgia, and I'm of course running from the last event I was just at. And I walk in, I sit down, and the teacher says, "Hey, it's good to finally meet you." She goes, "I have absolutely nothing bad to say. Your son is a gentleman. He calls me ma'am, and yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Everything's done on time." She goes, "I just have one question for you." She goes, "How did you raise him like this?" And I looked at her in the most serious thing, and I said, "Well, I beat him frequently, and of course, I'm just kidding. I'm joking, right? But I'm in uniform, I've got that look. And she goes, "Up until when you said that, I was going to actually have you come in and teach the other parents how to teach him." I said, "I don't beat him." I said, "But I raise him to respect people, work hard, and don't expect anything in life unless you work hard for it." I said, "I treat him just like I do my soldiers." And she said, "You're the first one I've ever heard say that." I said, "Well, because it's really the opposite. I treat my soldiers like I do my son because that's what their mothers and fathers would want me to do. That's what they expect of me. They expect me to lead their children like they would, or even better, right? So, and they expect me to discipline. They expect me to keep them out of trouble. They expect me to make sure they're proficient. They expect me to make them work hard, And I realized there's no difference in the way I was raising my son and my soldiers, or vice versa. Good parents are good parents. Good leaders are good leaders. And they're going to use the attributes from the things they do in a work environment every day, and they're going to carry home. So I'm proud to say that I treated my family like they were part of the team, and I'm proud to say that I treated my soldiers like they were my family.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that story up, because we were talking. Sergeant Cox actually is the one who brought it up about asking you about how you managed being at the top of the heap here, so to speak, and managing your work and home life. So that kind of, I think that strikes a note here. I mean, can you go a little deeper into that? Besides the story you just told, I think it kind of pretty much says it all. But I think maybe could you talk a little more on that?
Absolutely. It's tough. And this was the number one question as a Sergeant of the Army that I used to get at PCC, which is the pre-command course. That's every month for every new battalion, brigade, commander, and command sergeant major. This is the number one question. And our spouses, General Millie's and my spouses, were in the room when people asked this, and then both of our spouses would smirk because we weren't good at this. All right, so but this is tough, right? And I still get this question today. And actually, I have a whole leader development class on it, work-life balance. And here's what I learned: if you and your family just accept the fact that this is your life, you're going to be much happier throughout your Army journey. What do I mean by that? You are not going to have the same life that every civilian in a community who lives there their entire lives is going to have. You're not going to be a member of the same PTA or the same youth group. You're not going to be a member of the same church. You're not going to have the predictability that people have that work 9 to 5 in a normal job. It's just not going to happen. That doesn't mean it's bad. What we had was an incredible experience. We met new people. My son moved schools, but I'll tell you what, when I dropped him off at college, he was 5 times more mature than every other child there. And we embraced our life in the Army, and we accepted it as ours, and we were extremely happy. And Dad was gone, and Mom's rule was, Mrs. Dailey's rule was, when Dad's home, it's not about quantity, it's about quality, and we are going to do things together. We are not going to PCS without each other, regardless of how hard it is. We are going to keep this family together. And we're not going to start focusing on the times that we're not going to be together in the future and start making the time that we are together important and make it quality. So, and you don't need money to do that. When I'm talking about quality time, is like, going for a hike as a family, turning off the TV, getting outside, going for a walk. Those are the quality times a lot of families could use, right? And so the work-life balance, there's no such thing in the Army. Now, that's probably not the best recruiting commercial response you'd want, but in life, there's no such thing as work-life balance. There's work-life decisions, and we all make them, and we all live the consequences of them. So it's how you measure your value of life and what you do in it. And then you can really say what your balance is between that and work. Because the reality is we all got to work. We gotta take care of our families. We got to pay the bills, right? And in the Army, we have a higher calling to protect the people of the United States of America. And that comes at great sacrifice. And that's okay. As soon as you learn to accept the fact that that's your life, you and your family are going to be much happier.
Sergeant Major, I heard you talk a bit about, being a father and how to raise your child and some of the outcome that came from that. And then I heard you talk about, being a squad leader and having a team that, respected each other and fought for each other. When did you know in your career that you were doing it right? That you had the right leadership style, and what did that look like?
Yeah, I don't know if I ever got it right, but I do to this day realize that leadership is not achieved, it's sustained and improved, right? So you never become a leader. You are one, and you have to maintain that every day. And actually, after you become a senior leader, it's much harder to sustain than it is to become one. I don't think I ever got it right, but I did learn from the leaders that mentored me, and the ones I emulated, who I saw, is that when you build an organization that has an environment that's conducive to trust, not through fear, intimidation, where the subordinates have personal guilt when they fail to achieve for the organization and the leader, and that's not forced upon them. It's just a reality. And the organization has a true respect for each other and its mission. And any failure by one individual as part of that organization is a failure that just drives this personal motivation to get better, right? It's very hard to describe, but it exists. And there's the great units out in the Army do this every day. And I really saw the art of this from my commander when I was a division CSM, and I'll give him full credit on the mic today. Is he retired as a 4-star General David Perkins, and he was a master at creating that environment that I just described, an environment that was conducive to success for all the subordinates inside the organization, that he fostered an environment of collaboration and achievement where everybody wanted to help each other get successful so the organization can get better. He never raised his voice. He never yelled. He was so calm, cool, and collected. Of course, he was blessed with high intelligence, and he would tell you the same thing. He was mentored by great leaders in the past, and there's a lot of great ones out there. I think that most leaders who fail to do that are simply hiding behind a deficiency that they could probably correct. It's just hard to correct, or they don't want to. Right? So that's why I think leadership is so important to me, because I was an incredible benefactor from great leadership for so many years.
A lot of people think that creating an environment like that, man, if I was just a sergeant major, if I was first sergeant, I can create that environment. But sometimes, we can only affect those areas where we're directly at. And so my question is, what was your biggest challenge that you ever had creating an environment of trust?
Yeah, I don't want to get too specific. I don't even want to tell you what level I'm at, because people could read my bio. It's readily available by anybody in the world to read. But I did have a leader that created challenges inside the organization. And it was an officer in the organization, right? I'm not going to say they were a bad leader, but created an environment that was not what I just described, that was not conducive to success, and people didn't want to be part of it. And I remember being very frustrated. It was actually an inflection point in my career where the first time I ever came home and said, honey, when I hit 20, I think I'm going to retire. And the reason why is because the Army allowed this leader to ascend to this position of authority, and I was very frustrated because they shouldn't have. And this is where the true benefit of having an Army spouse that's committed to the Army and to our soldiers. And she looked at me, she says, hey, your job is to take care of those soldiers, right? And your job is to be the best leader that you can. And your job is to affect and influence those things you can. And without you there, they're going to be absent of someone who's willing to do that. And so you need to just forget it, shield your soldiers from that problem, get up, keep going, and don't be deterred by one individual. And she was right. And things got better. I mean, so, nobody died, nobody was hurt or anything like that. It wasn't that bad. But it was difficult because people inside the organization didn't want to be there because of one person. And it even frustrated me to the point to where I thought, how could the Army do this? How could they allow this? I'm going to get out. And my wife reminded me is that, hey, not everything's going to be perfect. And you shouldn't be upset by this. Because I hear soldiers and leaders say this all the time, I'm going to get out of the Army. I can't do this. Well, you can make a difference. One person can make a difference inside of an organization. And so after she had that conversation with me, I just went to work and started shielding people from it the best I possibly could, and making a difference and keeping the organization positive and moving forward.
What do you think that behavior that you went back to the unit and acted that way, what do you think that did for the soldiers that were under you, that were following you, that were seeing you as an example?
Yeah, I mean, it was literally having direct conversations with the people around me, and telling them, hey, listen, we have a mission here. Our job is to take care of this organization and lead it to success. And we're not going to change this guy. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen overnight. We're not going to change this guy. But let's not lose focus on why we're here. It's to take care of these soldiers and accomplish this mission. And when you sit down and, it doesn't always make everything better, but it makes them realize that we are here for a specific purpose and reason, and we got to continue to take care of these soldiers, and they deserve the best leadership that we can offer them.
This is a question I think that always kind of strikes a little bit of a spark in the guests that we talk to, and that is, what advice would present-day you give Sergeant Dailey? Sergeant Dailey just pinned on, 3 stripes. He's an NCO now. What advice would you have for that young man?
I would tell him, don't be so worried about your age.
Because you were so young at the time?
I would, yeah. It bothered me for years. It did. It bothered me for years. Probably too much than it should have, and it probably stifled my ability to be better at the time. To be very honest with you, it did. It bothered me. And actually, I just mentored a non-commissioned officer the other day about this. He called me and asked me about this because, he had been promoted and he was just selected for a very senior position, and he was getting the peer pressure about, oh, he's too young. And if I could tell Sergeant Dailey, I say, hey, just lead. Don't worry about it. Just lead. Because it did bother me. I was a very young sergeant. I mean, I think I was 19. I was a very young squad leader. And I always felt I had to work harder than everybody else to prove that I could do it, because the perception was that I couldn't because I was young. And there's probably a lot of positive to that too, right? I mean, so it pushed me, it drove me. I mean, and this was all up until the point I made Sergeant Major. I think I went to the Sergeant Major Academy with 13 years in service. I remember finding a baby bottle on my desk one day, and
was you the youngest Sergeant Major of the Army as well, Sergeant Major?
Yeah.
A lot of firsts.
And then I realized, you know what? It's experience is an important component of things, right? But it's not the only, all right? Because you got to combine it with knowledge, skills, and abilities, and desire to be an effective leader. And I always felt like I had to outwork everybody to prove that I could do it. And again, that was it probably bothered me too much. And if I go back and tell Sergeant Dailey, don't let it bother you that much, but it also probably drove me to be the most hardworking person you can imagine.
Along those lines, Sergeant Major, when I was a corporal, I was put in charge of another corporal who was senior to me in time in service, time in grade, everything. But I could do the job better than him, so they kind of put me above. Anyway, did you have challenges like that, where as a young sergeant you had the soldiers who were older and possibly more experienced? How did you handle that?
Well, basically throughout my entire career, to include being the Sergeant Major of the Army. Professionalism. The last thing you want to do is use your authority to override even a negative perception of your inability to do something because of your experience, because then it just feeds the fire of their perception, right? Is you got to work harder. You got to show them that you're a capable leader. You got to prove to them that you're confident, capable individual. There is no other way to do it. And by the way, that's how you do it anyway. Even if you had more senior, that's what's expected of you. And again, I told you it bothered me. It did, and I don't think I've ever said this publicly before, but it did. But it also drove me to work hard. I was either the distinguished honor grad or the honor grad at every single school I went to, and I don't mean that in a pig-headed way. It's because when everybody was out doing something, I was working, because I was trying to prove to everybody that I deserved to be there, regardless of how young I was. And I'm not the smartest guy. Don't think I'm like this gifted wizard. No, it was hard work. It was hard work. I mean, and so the same energy that was somewhat holding me back as a leader was also feeding my desire to get better. And so I would tell people is, hey, just do your best. People are going to say things. People are going to have perceptions. People are going to be, jealous of the fact that you make rank or someone's older. But we should be promoting based upon potential. And we should be selecting individuals for position based upon them being the most qualified individual. Experience is an important part of that, but it's not the only component to being a great leader. 30 years of experience doesn't mean you're a great leader. It means you have 30 years of experience. That experience may have been bad. You have to combine it with your knowledge, skills, and ability and desire to lead in our Army. And we have to not negate the fact that just because you don't have 30 years doesn't mean you're not as good. I mean, we have Olympians that are in their teens, and they outperform people who are much older. We have scientists in this world that don't have 30 years of experience, but they're inventing incredible things every day. The human potential, the human brain is fully developed. at age 24 and actually starts to degrade at age 45, roughly. So getting older doesn't mean you get better. It just means you have more experience.
You know, the question of your age. I always wondered when you were Sergeant Major of the Army, whether that was one of the reasons why wherever you went, Sergeant Major, you were a rock star. The soldiers were always. You went when you went. It was like there was a crowd of people, and people were excited to see you. Do you think that? Do you attribute that to maybe some of your or some of that to your youth, maybe, or what do you think? What do you think your popularity came from, or comes from? Because you're still popular.
Well, it's something I think I learned as a young leader is the best and most important thing you can give somebody is a thing you can't buy, you can't borrow, and they don't make any more of. And that's your time. It is the most important thing. And every single opportunity that I got to spend a time with a soldier, I would focus and listen to them. Some of the greatest ideas that came out from my 10 years at SMA came from just listening to soldiers, listening to leaders, going in the motor pool, sitting in the back. And I tell leaders all the time, if you don't want people to talk to you, then walk around and be mad all day. And I promise you, everybody will do everything they can to avoid you, okay? If you want to really know what's wrong with the Army, if you really want to know the problems, the issues and concerns, because ultimately that's your job, is you're trying to make your organization better, United States Army, and help the leaders below you accomplish their mission, right? And we're out there praising and looking for the good things too, right? But mostly I want to know what's wrong. And there's a way to do it that doesn't put people, make them feel contentious. So when I used to show up at installations, you're going to find something wrong. My job is not to point that out. My job is to help them fix it, right? So I would send a sit rep after every installation I went to, and I would CC the commanding general. And then I would give the chief of staff of the Army a list of the things that I was doing to help the CG fix it. It wasn't a poke in the eye. It was, and I think when you establish yourself as that as a person, I think that's what the soldiers, hopefully that's what they saw, because that's what I was trying to achieve is someone that you can talk to and trust, and you're not going to get yelled at. You're not going to get an attitude. God, I was Sergeant Major. I've seen a lot of bad things, I'm not going to get excited about them. All right, just tell me what's going on and we'll get them fixed. And I think they saw me as an individual that would honestly, change things too, right? So, and of course, sometimes you got to say no, right? So probably one of the biggest upsets of the soldiers after I gave them tattoos, black socks, and headphones in the gym is I didn't give them beards, right? Because there's a limit to but when you create that environment as a leader, meaning you're conducive, making an environment conducive to listening and truly making them feel like they're being heard. Because we all know, when you talk to a person, within a blink of the eye whether or not they're listening or paying attention to you. You know that. And it is incredibly powerful for the other person, or very put offish if you're not. And every single private I tried, at least, of course, you get very busy as Sergeant Major of the Army, I tried to give them the time they deserved and listen. And I think that spreads, right? And then, giving them tattoos back helps too. That's right.
I think you hit the nail on the head, though, with listening. I think at all levels, as an NCO, as a soldier in general, if you listen, you're going to get a lot more than if you just talk.
Right. And even if you listen, right, and you still can't give them the answer they're looking for, but at least you listened and gave them an answer.
That's right.
They feel heard. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I used to go to Sergeant Major Academy every year, and I'd do the town hall with the Sergeant Majors, and I would do it with the spouses. And I'll tell you, it's a very heated discussions, and I would immediately take responsibility. But it's incredible. Even though they get passionate about things, you find out that we don't always do everything right. And I'm in that room, and there was a spouse telling me, "Why are we going here? Why are we PCSing here? This makes no sense to me." And I looked at her and said, "You know what? You're absolutely right. That's stupid. Who told you guys are going there?" And then the great thing about being a Sergeant Major of the Army is you can pick up the phone and fix it right there on the spot, And then the people feel like, man, this guy listens, And in the same accord, you have to be a leader too, right? And you have to tell soldiers and families, no, Hey, no, we're not doing that. No. But it's okay to explain why. All right, because we're not doing that because here's why. We're not going to have beards because the perception of the American people that they deserve of a United States soldier is not consistent with our values. That's just simply it. It's and by the way, you're not going to be ready for combat when you deploy because your mask will not seal with a beard, right? So yeah, we're not having beards. Yeah, and then they get it. But you've listened, you've considered it, and you gave him an honest opinion rather just than your own, right? And I tried to never use my own opinions to lead the Army, but of course you got to make decisions in the best interest of the Army.
Sergeant Major, can you recall your most proudest moment during your tenure as an SMA?
Oh gosh, most proudest moment. I think it's so I worked really hard as the Trade Ops Sergeant Major to modernize our non-commissioned officer education system. Best in the world, but it needed modernization. From a digital perspective, I'm bringing it into from that standpoint, but also from a curriculum and academic equivalency. And I was very passionate about the fact that we gave our soldiers world-class education, but we gave them no credit for it. So I started on this bold idea of we're gonna accredit the Sergeant Major Academy, right? And as the Trade Ops Sergeant Major, and carried this work on throughout my tenure as the Sergeant Major of the Army. That building a university is a difficult process. It's not as easy as you think. At one point, I actually called the Department of Education and said, "Hey, do you guys have like a little pamphlet for building a college for dummies?" And what do I literally said, "What do I need to do to build a university?" I mean, that's where we started, right? And right before I retired, I was at the last Sergeant Major Academy graduation. We conferred the first degree at the Sergeant Major Academy, and I was so proud. I went to that school, which is the best the world has to offer. Every other military in the world emulates that facility and the structure of what we have at the United States Army Sergeant Major Academy. That's why 60 countries go there. But I was very upset when I graduated, thinking to myself, I had this world-class education, and I think when I did some college equivalency, I got like 3 credit hours or something like that. 3 credit hours for my tenure at the Sergeant Major Academy. And I said, this is unacceptable. And I was so proud that day that we handed a Sergeant Major a degree as a result of their experience at the Sergeant Major Academy. And most people will never know that took hundreds of wonderful people helping. That took the power of the secretary or the chief, and 7 years. At least 7 years of very, very, very hard work. And it was just it was a culmination, and it was more than just that. It was all the work that we did to modernize our education system. And I knew at that time the work that I had done from my tenure as both the Trade Ops Sergeant Major and the SMA was going to continue on after I left. So it was an ultimate prize, that I got to see this Sergeant Major get his degree handed to him for the first time. But it was also satisfaction that it's kind of, we're going to be in good hands for the future.
If you were SMA now, is there anything that you foresee that needs to be given some attention?
Ooh, this is a no-no for this is a no-no for former leaders and especially SMAs and chiefs, right? We don't sideline coach. But I'm going to answer this, right? But I'm going to tell you, this is not because of any failure of any leader in the United States Army. We have incredible, qualified, absolute, genuine, humbly serving leaders. I mean, and they're amazing people, and they deserve to be there. If I could change something right now, and this is higher than the Army, we have to get serious about recruiting. It scares the living what out of me right now. And largely because we have left recruiting to the Army. And I'm going to say this publicly. If the Army is left alone to recruit our nation's Army on their own, we're going to fail. Because armies don't build armies. Nations do. Nations build armies. Nations build navies. Nations build Air Force, Marine Corps, Coast Guards, and Space Forces. Services, largely, the Army can't affect this stuff. They can't affect what's going on. They can spend millions and millions of dollars on marketing, right? They can put recruiters out on the street. But what they can't do is replace 18 years of mentorship by influencers across our country. They can't affect that. They can't affect what mothers, fathers, coaches, teachers, guidance counselors are saying to young men and women across our country and influencing their actions upon graduation of high school. Recruiters can't change that perception in 1 week or one interview. And this nation needs to get serious about recruiting because we're going to have an army. This nation's not going to be without an army. And the Army's not going to decide how it's built if people don't volunteer. This nation is going to decide. So I know that's something that the Army can't necessarily change because I firmly believe they can't, but it's something that we have to, as a nation, need to start focusing on. And now I look back and say, man, how would I influence that if I was still the Sergeant Major of the Army today? And frankly, I would probably risk my career. I'd go up to testimony. And I would publicly ask Congress to get involved. Because they're ultimately going to be the ones to make the decision when we can't recruit an all-volunteer force on how to fill the Army, not the Army. And they'd probably yell at me, throw me out of the room. But I'm serious about that. This scares me right now. It scares me. And I think there's young men and women out there that are willing to serve this great nation, and they're physically fit and they're capable. They just need to be mentored. They just need to be influenced. Not every single kid that graduates high school needs to go to college, and they shouldn't be. We need people going to college. We don't need them all. And frankly, they all shouldn't be going there anyway because that's not what they're good at. We need to take the time as influencers in this nation to talk to these young men and women and inspire them about service rather than just say, what college are you going to? Because that's not the right answer.
Sergeant Major, you have the ear of the NCO Corps right now. What would be something you want to say to the entire NCO Corps?
Yeah, I would say we're the best non-commissioned officer corps in the world because of the things we have done to earn that title. And those are the things that are going to keep us the best forever. But it's not just by chance or happenstance or because it was in the past. It takes hard work to continue to do those things in the future. So I would tell our NCO corps, keep being the best by working hard to be better every day.
Thank you for joining us, Sergeant Major. It was truly an honor to have you on the show. Stay tuned for more interesting guests and inspiring conversations right here at the NCO Journal. Submit your articles, get published. Don't forget to visit our webpage and follow us on social media. We'll see you next time on the Sergeant's Time Podcast.